Good evening. My presentation isn't as exciting as everyone else's is. It's on professional briefings. Everyone has had those impromptu presentations they have been voluntoed for. My goal is to teach students how to be successful presenters and how to create dynamic and engaging briefings. Before I get started, let me give you a little background as to why I selected this topic. At Fort Leonard Wood, we teach a course called Civilian Staff Officer Course. I just assisted with rebuilding it, and there seemed to be a gap between the instruction for being a staff officer and building positive presentations. We weren't instructing the students on how to brief their presentations. But this is something that can't really be taught. It has to be a hands-on exercise. Nearly every employee at Fort Leonard Wood will be in a position where they have to present information. It is almost a job requirement. My goal is to build a simulation which will be a PE during the synchronous course where the students will be immersed in a briefing scenario. This simulation is intended for just about everyone at Fort Leonard Wood. Currently, the attendees for the CSOC are mostly interns and administrative personnel. The introduction to the simulation will be face-to-face. My motivator is, if you are like most individuals, your goal when giving a presentation is to capture your audience. Convince them they need your information while making it so engaging they ask you to come back for more presentations. The object is to get the students excited and engaged in the training and to acknowledge that this is information they need to know. This is the next part of the face-to-face instruction prior to the simulation. This information would also be in a tips section of the simulation during the introduction phase as they begin. Do your research. Be sure the facts you are presenting are true and factual. After you have your presentation finalized, do a rehearsal. If you can, have a coworker assist. I would purposely use some idiosyncrasies unique to my manner of speaking to see how many of them they picked up on. If you are talking your language, it is possible others will not be able to follow because they have no idea what you're talking about. We use terms unique to our upbringing. But does that mean that someone from Minnesota will understand my Alaskan and Missouri lingo? Keep that in mind and avoid slang and lingo. Know your audience, because you want your audience to be interested in and have a need to know the information you are presenting. Your audience should consist of individuals who have a stake in your presentation. You need to know those individuals. If you aren't familiar with those attending, show up early enough to go around and talk to the audience. If they feel you are interested in them, they will be interested in what you have to say. If you show up 3 minutes prior to your presentation and leave as soon as you're done presenting, your audience is going to think you aren't committed to your subject, and they'll follow your lead and leave just as quickly. Then the next time you are giving a critical briefing, most will be watching the clock so they can book out and will miss most of the critical points you make. So network, network, network. Again, this would be presented both during the face-to-face element building up to the PE, and then repeated in a tips section during the introduction to the simulation. The lead-in introduction portion of the simulation would be similar to, now that you have walked around prior to your briefing and introduced yourself to most of those in attendance, keep them engaged by being dynamic. Change your inflection. Move around if you can. Use animating gestures to captivate your audience. Remember, when you are giving a briefing, you are on stage. You need to keep your audience engaged in what you are presenting. Ask questions. Get your audience involved. Also, keep to the agenda. If someone in the audience tries to sidebar, pull you off topic, suggest tabling that topic for the next meeting or suggest the two of you discuss it after the meeting if it isn't critical to the other members. Always give your audience time to ask questions, request clarification, or just to keep them engaged. Conducting a clear, concise, and timely presentation will demonstrate your professionalism, and you will gain the reputation of someone who knows how to brief. It is always a good idea to time yourself while you are rehearsing to be sure you can present the material information in the time you have slotted. If you have too much information, conduct 2 short meetings. People can focus better on your information if they are not having to sit 2 hours for the presentation. This would be the slide or interface which activates the actual simulation. The purpose of the simulation is to develop students to be more confident in front of a group, a more engaging presenter, and to avoid the common mistakes presenters typically make. I'd tell them to select the module you would like to begin with. I suggest starting with the lowest level, Peer Project Officer. An introduction to each module would be a pop-up explaining the who, what, why, etc. about the module. Each module would be a team effort, one briefer and at least one audience member. After completion of each module, they would switch roles. At the end, they would conduct an after-action review, AAR, where each participant provides positive suggestions for improvement to each other. This is the lowest level presentations they are required to do as part of their job here at Fort Leonard Wood. It is being a peer or project officer. Next level presentations they would be required to do as part of their job here at Fort Leonard Wood would be to the staff or middle managers. And then the highest level presentations are to higher headquarters or command, which is typically to the commanding general of Fort Leonard Wood. The simulation interface would be similar to Second Life or Protosphere. However, the interface has to be web-based because we're very limited as to what we can download on government computers. I really like the way the Protosphere interface looked. It was easy to use and easy to set up. Those are some of the attributes I'll be looking for in creating this simulation. My focus will be on the students learning the material. If they are frustrated with a difficult-to-use interface, it will add frustration and shift the focus to the interface versus the content. I think it's essential the interface has the voice option and the chat option. Even though this presentation will take place in a classroom, I want the students to perform the AARs in the interface so it can be recorded and played back for review. It really enhances awareness if they can watch the presentation later, as they will pick up things they did that they would do differently, and it increases critical thinking. I am steering away from assessing the students too much in the simulation because they are graded on their face-to-face course, which this simulation would be only a lesson in. There are some aspects, however, that I think students need to be aware of, and if a grading rubric is used, then it will increase awareness. I have been thinking about doing a preliminary introduction video where I make some of the mistakes and have the students keep a score sheet so they can discuss it after my presentation to make them aware of typical briefing mistakes. Then after they watch my video with my briefing mistakes, which they have written down, they will be more aware of what mistakes to try to avoid. These are just some of the ideas I had that could be used for assessment. The learning theories that I used while developing my simulation were Prensky's game-based learning. I tried to make the simulation interactive, fun, engaging, and realistic. These scenarios are real-life instances they will encounter in their day-to-day job. I think Gagne's 9 instructional events apply to what I wanted to accomplish with this simulation as well. By immersing the learner into the environment, making the scenarios realistic, I believe retention will be enhanced. The AAR gives each learner an opportunity to provide feedback, which again will increase the recall of the content when in a real-life briefing. Roger Bruning's educational theory goes hand in hand with Gagne's. I believe the learner needed to be challenged to develop critical thinking, that they needed to be active learners and presented real-life problem-based learning. Bruner believed that learners develop cognitive growth in stages. He believed that the learner's environment and experience played a key factor in the ability to learn information. His theory suggests that the learner's interest in the material influenced their ability to learn the material. These theories influenced the way I designed both the simulation and the pre-instruction leading up to the simulation. Some of the questions I would ask at the end of the simulation are, what is the first thing you should do when preparing your presentation? And of course, it's double check your facts. What are the key reasons for rehearsing? To familiarize yourself with the material to ensure you can stay within the time frame you have slotted for the meeting. That is the end of the closure comments I would make to them. In conclusion, I chose this project because of a need. Every year, new interns are hired along with new personnel. Assuming that they are coming into service with prior briefing experience is impractical. Besides, the majority of interns hired have no military or government work experience, and briefing for the military is very different than briefing in the civilian sector. My goal is for this simulation to be completed. Our challenge will be to find a platform interface that can be used on government computers. I think the immersion into the simulation would enhance the retention. The learners will have an emotional connection with their avatar. Are there any questions?